in this beautiful venue, what has been provided for us by India Exposition Mart Limited, Greater Noida. We are very happy to have this August gathering also here today. We have eminent personalities on the dais. Um, Today's technical session, we would right away begin with the technical session. I request all the audience to be disciplined and attentive. The first session, that is today's session, will be chaired by, it is a keynote session and it will be chaired by Dr. HR Nagendra, who is the chairman of this Ayuryog Expo steering committee. Also, he needs no introduction in the field. However, I would humbly say a few words about Dr. HR Nagendra. He is an Indian mechanical engineer, yoga therapist, academic writer, and the founder, vice chancellor of Swami Vivekananda Yoga Anusandhan Samsthan, well known as Yes Vyasa, a deemed university located in Bengaluru. He is best known as the personal yoga consultant of Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi of India, and is a recipient of Yoga Shri title from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. He has authored 35 books and over 100 research papers on yoga. The Government of India awarded him the 4th highest civilian honor of the Padma Shri in 2016 for his contributions to the society. I kindly request Dr. HR Nagendra ji, commonly very popularly known as Guruji, to take over the session, introduce the speakers and moderate this session.
भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयामदेवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेमदेवहितं यदायुः ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः. My dear brothers and sisters, we are so happy that we have the galaxies of researchers, Swamijis, for this beautiful Ayuryog Expo and World Assembly of Ayurveda, Yoga and Naturopathy. And from today, we start our scientific sessions. And this first session is up to 11:30, and we have two top speakers of our country, the great researchers. Number one in yoga research today in our country is Dr. Shirley Telles. All of you know about her. And after doing her MBBS, MPhil, she did PhD in neurophysiology from the most famous institute in Bangalore, National Institute of Mental Health Neurosciences. Then she directs research in our university, and later on, now she is in Patanjali Yoga Peeth, and she has 161 research publications in all index journals. And if I look at all people in the world, she is number one in publications of yoga research in the whole world. She has written 18 chapters in books, and she has written 4 published books, and she rewarded from the Indian Council of Medical Research, the John Temple Foundation, United States, and a Fulbright Fellowship to study functional magnetic resonance imaging in meditators. Dr. Shirley has been continuing her research, and she is a guide and director for a large number of people in the country, and her specialty is psychophysiology of yoga and how it can be applied. And we are really fortunate that she could spare her time amidst her worldwide travel. Insensibly, she called for a number of conferences all over the world, and so nice that she could spare time and present her keynote on psychophysiology of yoga and its applications. Over to Shirley.
Namaste and good morning. Respected Chairperson, Dr. Nagendra ji, Thank you very much for the kind introduction, all the reputed scholars here and colleagues. I'm very grateful to the organizers to give me this opportunity this morning to tell you in the next few minutes about some of our research related to the psychophysiology of yoga and how this research can be applied in our daily life. Now, when we talk about yoga research, one question which comes in my mind, or a series of questions really, is when was this research done? When did yoga research really begin? Who did it? Where and how? And the answer I get to this question, you may get different answers, is that this really began with the ancient sages, the rishis of India. And what laboratory did they have then, thousands of years ago? The laboratory they had was their own body, their own mind. And they did not have fancy tools at the time. But because yoga is such an experiential science, they observed everything that was happening in their bodies and minds, and very carefully they've passed it on to us. So I will actually now move to the slides. Well, as many of it can be said till the slides come up, very luckily for us, the sages and rishis of ancient India passed on their observations about yoga practices, how to do them, what could be the obstacles, what could be the precautions, and they either passed it on to their disciples by word of mouth or by etchings on palm leaves. I've got a little picture, but you can all imagine it very easily. And that is how, because it was so systematically documented by the ancient sages, this yoga science, I call it a science of living. It's a whole way of life, which is a science, is wonderfully applicable even today. And so this is the slide which you can see. A sage writing what? Etchings on a palm leaf. And these etchings are the basis for the yoga texts, which are such an integral part of yoga philosophy. And when we talk of yoga benefits, we should always keep in mind the theory. Having said that, what is the evidence? So there are experimental techniques, a wide range of them have been used, imaging techniques which allow us in real time to say where and when a change is happening in the brain, including changes in neurochemistry and changes at the cellular level. All this is very important, and throughout the world, there's been a lot of research on how different yoga practices influence the physiology or the functioning of the human body, and of course that includes the brain and the mind. Over the years, that is from my postdoctoral research in SVASA, Bangalore, to the present time, we have tried to answer some questions, which you may find interesting. Now, most of us stand upright the whole day. What happens if you get into an inverted posture like the headstand or Shirshasana? What happens to the heart? What happens to the heart rate or the blood pressure? What happens to our eyes and our brain? And if you breathe alternately through the left and right nostril, does that really bring about, there is a lot of research on this, that it balances the logical, analytical left brain and the creative, intuitive right brain? Does that really happen if you test it in the lab? What about the cooling pranayamas? Shitali, Shitkari, are they truly cooling? Does our body temperature go down if we practice them in the laboratory? And when we come to meditation, if we go to the 6th and 7th limb of the Ashtanga of Patanjali, that is dharana and dhyana, are they physiologically different? Do they need to be practiced in sequence? Well, these are some of the questions we have asked in this long time span. I could go on with more questions. I'm not going to, it's a bit like a suspense story. I'm not giving you the answers, but I'm moving on to another very specific question which has a direct relevance to applications. Now, can yoga breathing help us to be focused? Like if you want to pay attention to what is being said, and I want to pay attention to what I am saying, I need to focus. And every time we focus on something, our blood pressure jumps up a little bit. So many people who have to make presentations take the help of tablets. So I have nothing much on the slides, 2 bottles of pills. And these tablets, unfortunately, have a lot of side effects. So Can yoga replace tablets? We have done a series of studies through the years, and one particular yoga practice I would like to emphasize. It's not a problem. That is, right from 1993 to the present time, one particular yoga practice, just 18 minutes of it, can 100% help in sustaining attention, shifting attention. Like suppose you're listening to me, and now you want to shift attention to what Dr. Nagendra ji says or what Dr. Lorenzo Cohen says. You want to shift your attention. This is the practice, alternate nostril yoga breathing, Anulom Vilom Pranayama. It helps us to have better attention, focused attention, shifting attention, but more important, not only does it prevent the blood pressure from rising each time we focus attention, it actually causes a decrease in both systolic and diastolic pressure. Now this is an immediate effect, all of you can even check it in your homes, of 18 minutes of alternate nostril yoga breathing. We've done a series of studies, and I don't normally say it is definite, but this result I am convinced about. 4 to 6 millimeters of mercury reduction in systolic pressure, around 2 to 4 millimeters of reduction in diastolic pressure. This is consistent across our studies, and a reduction in anxiety. And from this, I'm now going to move on to applications in daily life. How can we use all the knowledge which we are getting from so many sources in our daily life? So I've tried to divide it as applications across the lifespan, starting with children, just a little sample here and there, then adults in the working age group, and then older people, and that will really bring me to the end of my presentation. So as I start with children, I want to talk about at least two examples of children who have special needs. And the first group of children I'm going to talk about are those who are in a situation where they have special needs because of their situation in society. Okay, so the first example I'm going to give you is of juvenile offenders, children who are in a remand home. Now sometimes a child, a juvenile, a younger person commits a minor offense and they are put in a correctional facility. What is our goal? Our goal is that they should come out as better human beings. So we've done a series of studies across the years. It started with Bangalore. We've moved onwards after that. And what we have tried to see is what are their needs and how can yoga help them. I'm mentioning some of these ideas here because I feel that they are wonderful areas which many of the students here may like to take forward, many of the researchers too. So what did we find when we gave yoga for as short a duration as 3 months and later checked it again after 6 months? First of all, the children were better in their physical health. Their level of sympathetic arousal, their stress levels had come down, which was good. Much better, their behavior with other inmates in the home, behavior with the people who were managing the home was better. And third, and very important, they learned vocational skills, some motor skills, attention, their cognition was better, so that when they came out of the home, they would be able to do simple jobs. There's also one more very important component, which we are now fixing on, mental toughness. What is that? Many of these children come from a very disturbed background, where one parent or both parents are alcoholics. One child had actually seen her father murdering the mother. So they have a lot of deep-seated trauma. Can they develop emotional strength without becoming hardened? So can these children come out as beautiful, soft human beings, strong emotionally, but with compassion and kindness and all the softer emotions? This is something worth looking at. We are doing something in this area. What about children who have another type of deficit, children with impaired vision? So we worked with children, very lovely children, who were blind from birth. But really there are compensations, so they could not see at all, but their sense of music and rhythm was much better. And when they practiced yoga, those senses which were intact, like their sense of hearing, their love of music, of rhythm, of dance, their sense of touch to do braille reading became still better. So these are just two examples of children in a special situation. Now let's see everyday children, like all of us come across all the time. We did do a randomized control trial around 2012 up in Haridwar, in Doon School. They were very cooperative, and we published it in 2014. All the slides have the references where our papers were published. In them, we assessed their physical well-being through a whole battery, their cognition, their emotional strength, and the teachers' reports about their behavior, punctuality, that's very important, and also their academic performance. 98 children randomized as two groups, yoga and physical exercise, 49 in each group. So you may ask, what are the differences? That I don't need to tell all the scholars here who know yoga so well. Nonetheless, I will just mention a few differences. When we talk about yoga, yoga is an internal journey of awareness. We can do physical activity like jogging or running on a treadmill while watching a television or listening to music, but we cannot do yoga in that way. Yoga is all about internal awareness. Close your eyes and experience everything that's happening in your body, in your mind. One of the principles of cyclic meditation, which is one of the techniques of Dr. Nagendra in Svyasa. Very interesting. Then can we also see some other differences? Yoga practice should be relaxed. Yoga practice, and this is one of the emphasis our institution really has, the breath. So synchronizing the breath with the movement. So Swami Ramdevji, founder of our organization, places a lot of importance on yoga breathing. Now, when we looked at these two groups at the end of 3 months, both yoga and physical exercise were almost comparable with respect to their physical well-being, their cognition, their behavior. The only difference where the yoga group was better was in their academic self-esteem. That means they no longer depended on their examination results to feel good about themselves. So they did not need to do well in their exam to feel, I am great. Why is this important? Every year in India, after a major exam, all of you will know that there is a 24-hour helpline. Because if students don't do well in their exam, they get so upset, they have such low self-esteem, that they may even want to commit suicide. So now we will take this academic self-esteem and yoga in schools a stage further. Our most recent publication, again on children, before I move on to adults, is a very simple point. If we want to introduce yoga in schools, what about schools which don't have a yoga room, don't have mats? Can we have a classroom-based short intervention which will help children? So this was a question we asked this year. This was published in the journal Children. An 18-minute classroom-based intervention. What was that? Kapalabhati practice, as recommended by our institution, 45 to 60 breaths per minute. What were the benefits? One child you can see in the slide I've put is focusing on a book. That's ideal. The other child is focusing on a phone, possibly a smartphone. Not so good. What we would like is to be able to have more children being able to have a sustained attention on their textbooks and less distracted by social media and all the distractions which are available nowadays. We found that with 18 minutes of Kapalabhati practice, children were better able to sustain attention and shift attention when it was required. Much more important, anxiety is very high in children nowadays because there are so many expectations from their parents, from the school. Anxiety reduced, and this was published just a few months ago. Moving on from leaving behind children, and we'll talk about adults. Essentially, for this 30-minute presentation, I thought I will focus on adults in the workplace. One of the areas we have done about 10 years ago was professional computer users. Why am I mentioning this here, even though we have more recent studies which I'll be mentioning in a while, is I think it is so important because all of us spend time with screen time, we spend time with computers, tablets, smartphones, and what are the results? Everyone has some degree of anxiety and arousal. The more time we spend using a screen, the more we are aroused. If people use a screen after 7 p.m., there is research to say their sleep is interrupted and disturbed. So at this time, we had done a study in software companies in Bangalore, 200 people randomized as two groups, 100 in each group. One group was given yoga, 45 minutes of yoga, which included everything, that is loosening exercises, asanas, pranayama, meditation, and yoga theory, which is a very important part, as you will see. And the other group just had their recreation in the gym. We looked at their anxiety. This was important because 23% of the professional computer users were buying over-the-top counter, over-the-counter medication for anxiety, which is very bad. Now, of course, the rules are a little tightened, but even then there are loopholes and people can get anti-anxiety medication easily. They were also taking a lot of analgesics for back pain, pain in their wrist, dry eye. It's almost, you go to a chemist and they have artificial tears on the near the cash register. It's bought so commonly. Is that the way? We need to go back to nature there. So at the end of a 2-month period, there was reduced anxiety, effect of stress on the body, on the eye, on the back, right up to the wrist, musculoskeletal comfort, discomfort reduced and comfort increased. This was a study which we did long ago, but I feel it has a lot of relevance, and I would say anyone could take it one step further. What one step further would be interesting is to examine whether yoga can positively impact sleep in computer users. I feel this is very useful. We are doing something in this direction, but I'm also giving the idea to the audience if anyone would like to take it up. Another area which I am very interested in, can we use yoga for teachers? Because there is such a lot of talk of yoga in schools, the emphasis is always on the children. What about the teachers? We had 236 teachers. They were from the northeastern state of Sikkim. And 118 of them came to our yoga center, well, more of them, 306 actually. I'll be mentioning that in the next slide. But we picked out 118, and 118 were in their state and continuing teaching. At the end of 15 days of yoga, 240 minutes of yoga a day, remember it was a residential program, which included loosening exercises, asanas, pranayama, which is the emphasis of Patanjali Yogapith, and meditation, as well as, very emphatically I'll say, yoga theory based on the yoga texts, very important. There was an improvement in two aspects, which we examined. Their mental well-being, that we measured with the Warwick Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, and their levels of anxiety. And then we also spoke to 306 teachers, and this is our more recent publication, and we asked them, what are the causes of stress, if any? We had a very in-depth interaction. And they said, many of us thought that they have just joined teaching because, they had no other option. But many of them, at least a large percentage, I don't have the number because we didn't do a survey, but a large percentage were very enthusiastic about their job, which was very nice to see. But they said things like, there isn't much value for a teacher anymore in society. It's not all that well paid. We have long hours. Sometimes in certain schools, one teacher has to manage 60 students, and at the end of the day, our voice is tired. We are tired. We have dust allergy. They don't have smart boards. They still use chalk and duster. Some of them have very difficult teaching situations. So, teachers' professional well-being. When we talk about yoga in schools, please remember, wherever you are, include the teachers. I'll move on to another area, very important area, so this was done, teachers' well-being was done, we studied this, 306 teachers from Sikkim. They were also around 40 plus or minus 6 years of age, females and males, whereas the next group of people were all males and a very important occupation. Yoga for the military, in this case the border security force. These are the young men, 30 years plus or minus 6, so some were in their 20s. They came to our center, 722 of them, and they had a lot of problems. They felt hyper-aroused. Imagine they are actually guarding the country's borders. So they said, we never feel that we should relax. We always feel anxious even in our sleep. Can yoga help? So then we did examine their sleep, their vigilance or alertness, as well as their anxiety levels. They were given 9 days, because that was all that could be spared, and 240 minutes per day, where they had loosening exercises. A lot was needed, a lot of asanas. A great emphasis was given on pranayama and meditation. Initially, the young men could not calm down. They were too hyper-aroused to do pranayama. But after some time, with a lot of loosening exercises, they could do this intervention. And then we found very dramatic changes in their sleep. These are the references where we've published it. Their sleep, first of all, was better, the night sleep. Their number of arousals in the daytime went down. They also took less time to fall asleep. 9 days of yoga helped them to improve their sleep, so their nighttime sleep was better. Imagine these young men, all the time vigilant. Can they see the enemy? We don't like to think of the military and yoga, but yes, they do deserve our attention, whichever country you're from. Yoga for the military, I think, is a very important branch, because they're really sacrificing a lot to make us safe. So can we improve their sleep? Yes. The number of arousals in the night were less. Their time taken to fall asleep was less. They slept better. Their feeling of being refreshed in the morning was better. And this is 722, not a small sample. They were more vigilant. We tested this with a specific test for vigilance. And their anxiety at the moment of testing was less. If anyone wants the publications, we will definitely send them to you. Another area which we talk about in connection with adults, and even children nowadays, unfortunately, is central obesity. Obesity in general, and central obesity in particular. That is, in South Asia particularly, weight tends to gather around the waist. Now, this could be just under the skin, which is called subcutaneous fat, or it could be packed between the organs, which is called visceral fat. Now, we are now doing a study where we are looking at the visceral fat, particularly with MRI. Why do we want to look at visceral fat? Visceral fat is particularly deadly because it is associated with chronic inflammation, which can cause cardiovascular and brain disorders, fibrosis, which can affect all the organs where it is packed. See, it's all packed between the organs. We don't want damage to the kidney, right? We don't want damage to the liver. And definitely, visceral fat is associated with insulin resistance. So we have started in Patanjali Yogpeeth a nationwide obesity campaign in 2016, where we went through 24 states, 2 union territories. We had a huge sample, 10,000 in a yoga group, 10,000 in a control group. Of course, there was a lot of attrition. 3 years and several publications later, I would like to mention that yoga definitely does help to bring about a clinical reduction in BMI, a reduction in risk factors associated with cardiovascular disease. I won't go into too much detail. And how does it do it? It acts on a particular chemical which is secreted in the body. This chemical is called leptin. The body is so marvelous that when we produce extra fat, the fat itself secretes this chemical called leptin, which acts back on the brain, telling us to stop eating. Now, as human beings, we have the free will whether to listen to that voice telling us to stop eating or not. Yoga increases the production of this natural appetite suppressant. We have a series of publications right up to the present time. So our belief is that yoga helps to not only get weight loss, but very important, sustain it by helping us to eat healthy. If you're provided, say, with a lot of deep fried food, say French fries and rather nice, appetizing looking burger, difficult for all the people here to call a burger appetizing, I know. How many, I know in this audience, probably everyone would say they'd choose the fresh fruit and vegetable. That is what we want to make the change in the world. And yoga can definitely go a long way to making that change. I'm almost coming to the end. Yoga for a geriatric population, very important. Yoga for older people. We should never think that this population does not have needs. Yoga can help and does help to reduce their depression, particularly feelings of uselessness, worthlessness, loneliness, improves the quality of sleep, both in the night and in the day, improves their gait and balance. Because very, very often, if an older person has a fall, that's the beginning of the end of their independence. Improves the memory. I think all of us begin to worry about memory after a certain age, and it improves their lung functions. As I said, these are our publications. Now, I'm really coming to the end of this presentation. I think I've maintained my time. Okay. I want to emphasize one thing. I know that all of you here will be knowing this. Yoga goes far beyond a single practice, whether it's asanas or pranayamas, kriyas, meditation, or all of these. There are much more. There is the asanas or the pranayama or the meditation. There is also the silence, the bhakti component, the self-study, the self-awareness. And we should not be frightened to use these words. Medical journals now accept that self-study, self-awareness, bhakti is an important part of the treatment or using yoga as a therapy. So we should not be frightened to say bhakti, devotion to any deity, irrespective, we're not saying one deity, the divine, the goodness in nature, and the philosophy which is so invaluable of the ancient sages. As I began with, I end. We should really incorporate that. I always say, if you have a yoga class, take a simple sutra, write it in a blackboard or whiteboard, so that people can go away with that message at the end of the class. And I always like to end with this. I've gone on with this for the last 20 years, I think. Yoga takes us far beyond the physical. It calms our mind. It elevates our spirit. It brings about balance of ourselves within ourselves with other people, ourselves and the environment, homeostasis, and helps for peaceful coexistence of people of all faiths. Thank you.
Wasn't that wonderful? Give a good hand to Shirley. Has been so wonderful that he brought the usefulness of yoga for the school children, the teachers, and people who are in profession, computer users, and for the major problem of today, obesity, and also for geriatric population. Swami Kuvilananda way back has said, yoga has a message for all. And Shirley's presentation showed scientifically that it is so. So congratulations, Shirley, for your wonderful presentation. And we hope you will do many more things in this line and see that it comes up beautifully well. Then we have our second presentation by Lorenzo Cohen. He is the topmost researcher in the field of yoga and alternate systems of medicine in MD Anderson Cancer Center. And coming from the background of psychology and advanced research, many of you know that MD Anderson Cancer Center is the biggest and #1 cancer institute in the world. It's in Houston, Texas. And he heads this division of dealing the cancer by various techniques of yoga. The question is, what type of yoga can we use? What is that component of yoga that brings results for the breast cancer has been his study. So he designed a wonderful 3-arm trial in which he wanted to see whether really it is the relaxation that brings all the result, or it is the physical exercise component, or it is the mind relaxation component, and all that he brought out. And he is one of the topmost researchers in MD Anderson Cancer Center in bringing these dimensions of complementary system to the whole approach. And therefore, we are really very delighted, Lorenzo, for your presence here. And I know how busy you are, day and night, and working so hard, writing papers and conducting the experiments, a number of projects he has. And he got a $5 million grant from the NIH for this big project. And so Lorenzo is going to present his work today in a very nice way, and all of you will enjoy his beautiful presentation. Over to Lorenzo.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, for inviting me here today. I'm thrilled to be able to address this esteemed audience of scholars, gurus, rishis, and most importantly, the people who are practicing yoga. I'm going to take us through, what I'm going to do this morning is share with you, importantly, what we're doing at MD Anderson, which is a hospital focused exclusively on treating cancer patients. And we treat more than 45,000 unique cancer patients every year, with more than 1 million treatment deliveries to different individuals over a period of 12 months. What we know about cancer that is so important is that although we are making progress in the field, let me just mention this as a disclosure, which is that I've published a book available both in British publication that you see on the left, as well as a US publication that lays out the thesis and recommendation of how to prevent cancer. And I'll go into some details about this, but I'll get to the punchline, which is essentially leading a yogic lifestyle. This is the ideal way to prevent cancer, as well as all the non-communicable diseases that we'll be talking about today. So we are making progress in treating cancer with a 25% reduction in cancer cases. But the challenge we're going to be seeing is that we have a tremendous increase in the number of individuals getting cancer and dying of cancer. This is going to be a world phenomena, and most challenging in the developing world, and specifically in India and China. But the very good news is that the majority of cancer is preventable. And I'll quickly walk you through this slide, which applies to our world as a whole. 30 to 35% of cancers are due to tobacco-related behaviors. And of course, this is an extreme problem in India and includes betel nut, chewing tobacco, etc. Then the next category is obesity or overweight. And if you combine diet and exercise into this category, this accounts for another 30% of cancers. Then there's the virally mediated cancers. Human papillomavirus causes almost 100% of cervical cancers. This is one of the top cancers in India, and it causes about 75% of head and neck cancers. This is a virus that is communicable through risky sexual behavior. Most important thing to know is we have a vaccine against this type of cancer. We could wipe cervical cancer off of the face of the earth if everyone within the appropriate age range actually got vaccinated. And again, this is a huge burden in India. Then we see diet, we see physical activity. Alcohol is an A1 carcinogen, meaning that alcohol causes mutations in cells that lead to cancer. And this, again, is something that we can control. Then we have sun exposure, environmental toxins. This very important paper was published in Nature just last year, and it essentially shows that environmental exposures, lifestyle choices, and other factors that can be avoided account for 70 to 90% of the mutations that are responsible for cancer. If we look here at India, the top 5 cancers in men and women, these are preventable cancers. It is shocking to me that now the #1 cancer in women in India is breast cancer. This was not the case 20 years ago. Breast cancer is primarily a lifestyle disease. And I know some of you are probably thinking, well, cancer's in my family. My mother had cancer, my grandmother had cancer, my grandmother's grandmother had cancer. And there is a hereditary factor behind cancer, but that actually only accounts for about 5 to 10% of cancers. That begs repeating. Only 5 to 10% of cancers are due to an inherited gene mutation. The rest has to do with random chance, which is a small factor, and then the majority are things that we can control, these lifestyle factors. So let's jump to this next slide. So the obesity epidemic. In the United States, over 1/3 of adults are classified as obese. If we talk about just being overweight, 2/3 of adults, almost 3/4 of adults, and 1/3 of children are classified as obese or overweight. I see this same problem in India, where you see some statistics here. Almost 3 out of 4 Indians are overweight, very comparable to the challenges that we are having in the United States. And of course, we know what the primary cause here, that it is our diet, it is our sedentary behavior, and unfortunately, people are shifting the kinds of foods that they are eating. And although the samosa may not be the healthiest of foods on the Indian buffet, it is certainly healthier than what we have produced in the United States. And now there's clear data showing that at least a dozen different cancers are related to obesity and overweight. And this is why we see a shifting landscape of the types of cancers that are being diagnosed around the world, where again, we see breast cancer, #1 cancer in women in India. So this is where we turn to integrative medicine, because it's not just about treating a disease. It's trying to first and foremost prevent a disease, and then all of these factors that I just described to you are relevant for actually controlling cancer as well. In my book, Anti-Cancer Living, we talk about this as the mix of six lifestyle factors that we know will help to lower your chances of getting cancer. After a diagnosis of cancer, will improve outcomes. The first 3 that are on this list are often not talked about, and this is what I'll spend a bit more time going into today. Everyone talks about diet and exercise and the importance of those things, but social support, social connection, managing one's stress, having healthy sleep, and at a deeper level that I'll touch on at the end is this connection between human beings. Looking at yoga beyond just lifestyle, but looking at yoga from an origins perspective of this energetic force and as a energy-based medicine. At MD Anderson, we have a wonderful integrative medicine program that provides services in all of these areas, mind-body practices, appropriate therapeutic interventions like acupuncture, massage, as well as ensuring people are appropriately socially integrated. I'm just going to touch on exercise. Exercise we can see here, you probably can't at the back, but it is linked with preventing up to 8 or 9 different cancers. And again, the more active the cancer patient is after a diagnosis, the better their outcomes. When it comes to diet, there's a lot of confusion out there. Do I need to be vegan or vegetarian? What about the ketogenic diet? This is all false promises, and the reality is eating a plant-centered whole food diet. In fact, eating what people consider a traditional diet, and avoiding processed food, avoiding lots of white foods. Now, what's very important to know is these lifestyle factors not only make you feel good, they deactivate key biological processes, and I'm not going to go through the details that are listed here, but cancer needs an initial mutation, and then 1 or more of these 10 factors need to be activated to allow a cancer to grow and thrive in the body. These lifestyle factors, stress, diet, physical activity, sleep, activate 1 or more of these cancer hallmarks. Leading an unhealthy lifestyle essentially allows our body to be more hospitable to cancer growth. We have a lot of ongoing research in the area of acupuncture. This is clearly helpful for managing a number of symptoms. And in fact, we have a recent publication showing that xerostomia can actually prevent the progression of acupuncture can prevent xerostomia, and we have this coming out in a JAMA journal later next month. We have a lot of ongoing research in the area of natural products. This, of course, falls into what we would consider some of the Ayurvedic supplements and herbs to prevent cancer, help patients after a diagnosis. The challenge in this area is actually no good evidence from large phase 3 clinical trials to show that any herb or supplement will prevent cancer or actually treat cancer. There's some indication that some herbs and supplements will help to improve a patient's quality of life, such as mistletoe, but the data is lacking. And we have a lot of relationships with these natural product companies that want to fund research just like a drug company does. And this is really the path forward to be able to get a lot of these drugs and herbs and supplements as part of the standard of care to do systematic research. So I encourage the Ayurvedic companies out there to invest in the R&D that's necessary before going to the public, because there can be potential harm. So let's get into the main part of my presentation here, where I'm going to talk about stress and yoga and how to manage stress. We have a very hardwired stress response that, evolutionarily speaking, has been very adaptive for us. I would argue that we have evolved from our ancestors who had an acute stress response because this was able to get you out of danger. The increase in heart rate and blood pressure, the mental acuity, always scanning the environment for potential danger, meant that that person was able to get out of danger more effectively and able to procreate more, and therefore we've evolved from these people who were extremely sensitive to stress. The problem is that stress can actually get into the tumor microenvironment, making it more hospitable to cancer growth. The increase in norepinephrine, one of the key stress hormones, activates all of the cancer hallmarks, again making the body more hospitable to cancer growth. And I won't get into the details of what's on this slide here, but essentially it's innervating the immune system, and again innervating all the different cancer hallmarks. So what is a person to do? Well, on that next slide, we see a doctor telling a patient that stress is killing you. You just need an easier job, a smaller house, and a different family. Those of you who are parents know that a different family will often reduce somebody's stress. But of course, this is not something that we are able to effectively do. But there are so many things from a mind-body perspective that we can do. And of course, today we're going to focus on yoga. A little bit about how yoga came to me. This is a picture of my grandmother, Vanda Scaravelli, who became a yogi in her 40s. Vanda always spoke to me about yoga as more than something physical, although you can see a very advanced asana that she's doing here. She had 3 main gurus for fostering her yogic lifestyle, and she really led a purely yogic life. She had one individual who really helped to guide her on the mind, and this was Krishnamurti, and she had a deep personal relationship with Krishnamurti that helped guide the philosophical side of her life. The asana and the physical component was taught to her by BKS Iyengar. So Iyengar taught her some of the physical side, and you see here on the next slide a very physical aspect with Iyengar on the left with Vanda doing Paschimottanasana. And then for the breath, so the mind, the body, and the breath, there was, of course, Desikachar, who was a master of the pranayama. And of course, all of this comes from the lineage of Krishnamacharya. So when Vyasa approached me to do yoga research, I immediately said yes, and we have been collaborating now for close to 20 years of looking at the benefits of yoga in oncology populations. We've published a number of different clinical trials, but as Dr. Nagendra mentioned, I will describe this 3-arm clinical trial we published a couple of years ago in the Journal of Clinical Oncology. So not only did we compare yoga to usual care, the left and the far right, but we also compared a group that just did some gentle stretching exercises to be able to see, was this something more than just the physical side of things? And we see here change from baseline. These were breast cancer patients undergoing radiotherapy. So we see improvements, in particular in the yoga group. The stretching group falls in the middle, but it was really only different than usual care at one time point. So really the benefits all favoring yoga. Similarly, for a measure of general health, the benefits all favoring yoga. And to me, probably one of the most important measures, and we'll get more into this briefly, is this measure of benefit finding, more of a psycho-spiritual ability to find meaning in the illness experience, this trauma of a life-threatening illness. And we see that it remains better over time than when they entered the study, but only for those who are in the yoga group. This is a reflection of a stress hormone, cortisol, that's high in the morning, drops throughout the course of the day. The steeper the cortisol slope, the better the health, and the longer the patients live from previous studies. What we see here from before to the end of radiotherapy is a blunting of the slope, but the steepest slope was for the individuals practicing yoga. So this means that not only did yoga improve subjective reports of well-being, but also improved their overall physiological functioning. Now, the challenge that we have in the West, and I think we have the same problem here, is that this takes time, this takes practice. It may not take as much time and practice as individuals think, but it is not a pill. And in fact, some of the research proving that stress causes cancer and progression of disease is when we looked at the benefits of a beta blocker that blocked the stress hormone. So people, of course, want to just take the pill, but this isn't healthy in the long run. There's been a tremendous surge in research in yoga, in particular in oncology. And we see here tracking over time of the number of publications. And on the axis there, the numbers go as high as 60 in a given year, just focusing on cancer. When Satbir, Shirley, and Timothy and I published a book on yoga and health, there was so much research in cancer that we needed 2 chapters dedicated to that topic. And here we can see, and I won't go into the details, some of the evidence for yoga for many different, both physiological as well as psychological outcomes. So what's important to share is that yoga and mind-body practices have now been recognized by authoritative bodies that make the guidelines for how we're supposed to treat cancer patients. And you can see here the guideline for anti-emesis, which means anti-nausea, that yoga is listed as a practice that should be provided to patients in the cancer setting. Similarly, for fatigue, we see yoga listed here with Category 1 evidence alongside all the other areas. And then lastly, we see for pain management, and of course for distress, but for pain management as well. ASCO, also the authoritative body for oncology, writes guidelines, and they specifically endorse the guidelines from the Society for Integrative Oncology for integrative therapies during and after cancer treatment. And we see here the primary guideline that meditation, yoga recommended for anxiety and stress reduction, yoga recommended for depression, mood disorders, yoga recommended to improve overall quality of life. Now, I would say that our work is done, right? That we have shown and we've gotten buy-in from the bodies that make the rules, but no insurance company in the United States pays for yoga. So there's a bit of a disconnect where the authoritative bodies making the guidelines have said there is enough evidence to prescribe yoga for all these different aspects of cancer care, but it is still not being reimbursed. So we've done some research going beyond what is happening in terms of a person's physical well-being. You heard this spectacular data in the body of work from Dr. Telles and her colleagues over the past decades, clearly showing the physical changes that happen due to yoga, the quality of life changes, test score changes, decrease in burnout, et cetera, et cetera. But what's happening inside? What's happening at a more profound psycho-spiritual level? The only way to really get at that is to talk to people and to ask them. And we've done some what you could call more qualitative research with these patients and asking them what is going on. And those who practice, of course, have improvements in aspects of quality of life and blood pressure and blood sugar and all these other things we measure in medicine. But there's something much more profound going on at a deeper level. We've been doing now a clinical trial that is focused more on comprehensive lifestyle change, really taking this mix of 6 of all of these different areas and using a comprehensive approach where we've published the outline of this study that's essentially taking breast cancer patients when they're undergoing radiotherapy and counseling them very intensely for a period of a whole year on how to change their lifestyle. And behavioral counseling, yoga, meditation really being one of the key components. And I thought I would share one quote in particular from a patient that really gets at this psycho-spiritual side of things, where she said, "I don't know if anyone has ever felt like this, to have so many questions, but the answers are trapped in you. That's how I felt for so long. Well, I've come to realize that through meditation and deep relaxation, that my answers are flowing. I can honestly say that I've never been in such deep thought about my life." This goes beyond just improving somebody's blood pressure and their quality of life and their sleep, and really gets at some of the essence of what one's trying to do in transforming lives. In our book, we talk about the synergy between all of these factors, and this is really what's critical, not looking at them in isolation, but combined. So the last section I want to talk about is probably the most important section, looking at yoga as something beyond the physical and the psycho-spiritual, and looking at yoga as a biofield therapy. We are energetic beings, we are all connected to each other, and most importantly, we are connected to a universal force that we really don't understand. This is all measured in some sense. We measure biophotons, we measure the electrical activity of the heart and of the brain, and we think about these biofield interventions that yoga, tai chi, qigong actually falls into these categories. And then there's the external aspects of this. If we look at some of the more energetic side of yoga, I don't need to tell anyone in this room, these are slides courtesy of Dr. N.V. Raghuram at Vyasa, that some of the aspects of yoga originate from this energetic model. And the koshas is something that, of course, is worked on in one's practice. And I think that certainly in the West, but I see it happening in India as well, is that the practice of yoga gets stuck around the ananamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, and we forget to go further out. Well, this is really the aspect of yoga that we need to focus on, which is joining the individual soul to the universal soul. And this is a classical definition of yoga. Well, we've been working for a number of years with this energetic healer who uses his own biofield to actually modify cell growth. And we've for those interested in the publication, published this study earlier in the year, and I'll show you some of this data. So this is comparing, no, go forward a slide, comparing the healer healing mice, transmitting his biophotons into mice that have lung cancer compared to animals who were exposed to a sham. You can see the cancers are accelerating and growing, but much slower if they were exposed to this form of biofield therapy. We see here much lighter tumors for those exposed to the biofield therapy, as well as a modification in a number of different markers. That first one on the left there is expression of PD-L1. PD-L1 is active in many different cancers. And the birth of immunotherapy that Jim Allison from MD Anderson won the Nobel Prize for last year was specifically in treatments that block PD-L1. Biofield therapy reduced PD-L1 expression by 78%. This is something that is quite profound. A number of different other pathways we see also being impacted in terms of inflammatory pathways, chemokines, a reduction in cytotoxic T cells, Treg cells, which help cancer to grow, as well as macrophages. In our most recent study, we actually found increase in necrosis for the animals who were exposed to the biofield therapy. And what's quite interesting is that these animals, if you go back a slide, these animals in particular, these 4 or 5 animals that you see here that had no cancer growth were the ones in the left side of the chamber, and you'll see why that matters in the final slide. So we also saw, again, a decrease in macrophages, and very importantly, a decrease in stem cell markers. So we're really good at treating primary cancers, and we do not know how to treat cancer stem cells. Cancer stem cells, if not killed, end up becoming the metastatic disease that takes an individual's life. We see here large differences in the ability of the stem cells to grow, where we see a lot of stem cells in the control group and almost none in the biofield group. So we're not going to be able to see this video, go to the next slide, but what has been very consistent in working with this biofield therapist is that, and you see it but not moving, the animals on the left are all clumped up to the front. They're seeking this energy from this healer. The control animals are running around like mice. They'll clump up, they'll run around. And in particular, it was the mice on the left side of the chamber, because he in particular is emitting these powerful biophotons from his left prefrontal cortex. The animal can sense this type of energy. This type of practice and power is available to everybody, and it's something that can be cultivated through a deep, deep practice of yoga. So in closing, I always like to close with a quote from my grandmother, Vanda Scaravelli, and she talks about yoga from the lifestyle perspective. Yoga is a living process that changes moment by moment, watching when we eat, how we eat, when we walk, how we walk, what we say, how we say it. All these things are in us and we must be passionately interested in them all. Thank you.
Sure, he deserves a standing ovation for his wonderful work that he had done and the way that he presented. Thank you, Lorenzo, for your great presentation. And as you saw, he has been a pioneer in bringing the dimensions of yoga, behavioral therapy, and psychological dimensions in dealing with cancer. How one can prevent cancer is one of the major things that he has been working, and has been able to show that yoga can bring in the necessary improvements in cancer, and that has been his great work. With this, now the floor is open for questions and answers. So to save time, to have the right and good questions, I request those people who have questions to write their questions and pass it on to me. And that's how we are going to address the questions which are very relevant and also deep. Otherwise people go on talking and we lose time. So we have less time, therefore my request to all of you, please, those who have good questions, deep questions and stirring questions, please write down in a sheet of paper and send it, and that's how we are going to take up this question and answer session. Before we start off this question and answer session, we have got the Ashish Jain, who is the CEO of the Health Sector Skill Council, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. And in our country, the skill ministry is developing a lot of skills. So we need a lot of skilled people to deal with yoga therapy in various fronts, and diabetes, in hypertension, in cancer, in various dimensions, including obesity and others. Therefore, yoga therapy assistant qualification has been developed by the Skill Council with the help of our Indian Yoga Association, and using this, now the skill training program for yoga therapy assistant has been approved by the Ministry of Skill Development. And therefore, I request Ashish Jain to give a very brief introduction of what it is about before we start off with the question and answers. Once again, I request all people to write down the questions and pass it on, so that this question and answer session will be really very fascinating and very deep. Ashish.
Good morning, everyone. I thank you, Guruji, for giving us this opportunity to present what has been done. I think we had wonderful speakers in the morning. Both of them spoke about what yoga can do to various ailments, diseases we are being looking at today. I think that is fine. So how can we actually, for all these, probably we need yoga therapists actually on ground to see how yoga can be utilized for the for recovering from these diseases which has been there. So before I go to the yoga therapist qualification, briefly, as Guruji has told me that there are only very few minutes, I'll take you through what is the Healthcare Sector Skill Council, how we are constituted, etc. As Dr. Nagin mentioned, Healthcare Sector Skill Council is a body which is under the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, which works in creating the skilling ecosystem, the skills curriculum, etc., along with the partners like we had done with IIA in this case. This is the scope which we work in, and then you can see on the top of the tree there's an Ayush, which includes the area of work which we do. We are present pan-India. We are working internationally as well, but this is representing Indian right now. This is our mandate in terms of saying if you look at the bottom, it is the development of national standards. So when we say standards, probably I think yoga has been traditionally been taught in India by the sages and the rishis and munis as well. But I think how to standardize yoga into a country and then which can be taken abroad as well, probably that's what we are trying to do, where we are bringing in the government recognition to saying this is how this is the curriculum which is standardized and approved by the government of India. In that case, that's what we do. Rest all, I'll not talk about this right now given the time constraint. We work largely with the sector experts because we are not experts ourselves. So what we do is we provide a platform to all the experts to come together across the country, across the world, to develop a minimum standard or the best standard which can be made a global standard or which could be standardized to be practiced across the globe. And if you see the institutions which we are working closely in the essentially the yoga area, of course IY is our knowledge partner in working for this. Vyasa is, we are being, thankful to Dr. Nagin that we are working closely with Vyasa also because of him, and the many others which are there mentioned here. How we are working on this? So this is the brief structure. This is how we are, being created. So there is a healthcare sector skill council on the top. Then there is a sub council which is created on the Ayush. This is being mandated by the Ministry of Ayush, Government of India, and the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. So it's been through the mandate which you received from the Government of India to create this sub-council. And the chairperson for this sub-council is also being nominated by the Ministry of Ayush directly. Under this sub-council, we have various national committees. You can see for National Committee of Ayurveda and Yoga. And you can see that the National Committee in Yoga is being chaired by Dr. HR Nagendra himself. So we are working under his guidance to see how the standards could be developed for yoga, therapy, etc. Coming quickly to the standards we have developed till now, we have worked on 2 standards, with the blessings of Guruji and the other experts in this area. One is yoga therapy assistant, other is the Panchkarma technician. So these, as Dr. Nagin just mentioned, these 2 qualifications have become now the national qualifications, approved qualifications, is part of the national qualification register also now. And the training can be initiated on this. Our stall is outside the venue. If anybody is interested how to do training, the proposal how they can actually go forward to become a training institution for these roles can be explained there. We had an MOU with IA, which is the photographs while we are signing the MOU in presence of Dr. HR Nagendra and Shri Ravi Shankarji. We had various workshops which we have done on this before we reached out on the standardized curriculum, and in this we had participation from the yoga expert across country, and they had extensive deliberations over the period of time before finalizing the curriculum which we have done for yoga therapy assistant. This is the photographs of those. So I'm coming to specifically to yoga therapy assistant. So we have right now created a yoga therapy assistant qualification for 2 roles. One is diabetic care and second is the palliative care. I think both of things have been mentioned by the previous speaker also in terms of the importance of the palliative care and the diabetes as well. When we draw a qualification, one is that the standardized curriculum is drafted. Second, we do not step on the standardized curriculum only. We go forward and we say we develop the handbooks also, which is given to the trainee and a trainer, and then we have of course certified trainers and assessors, so that the entire ecosystem, while the person comes out from the ecosystem, is a standardized person, which that person has the certain competencies with them. So these are some of the visual, of the handbooks and the facilitator guide and the model curriculum, which are available for public use and available on our website as well, on the NSDC website and the Government of India website also. Anybody is free to use, but only thing is that if somebody wants a certification from Government of India, they need to go through us. That's all. If this is the last slide I'm talking about, if anybody wants to partner with us in terms of giving their comments, becoming experts. So I think these are the ways an individual can join us or an organization can join with us. I'm just leaving my email ID with you at the last slide. In case any of you want to contact us, give any one of your feedback, comments, I think this is where you can write to us, reach to us, and we'll certainly reach back to you. Thank you so much.
So we are glad that some of you have written nice questions. about this. And thank you very much, Ashit Jain, for taking this initiative to bring in the dimension of yoga therapy assistant, which is very much needed today. Particularly of the big diabetic program that we did throughout the country in 60 districts, scanning 2.5 lakh people and bringing 3 months yoga program, and which got the award from the American Diabetic Association to our IBA chief, Dr. Nagaratna, and now we are taking up the cancer project. So the diabetic thing that has brought to the fore the diabetic protocol that was developed by all experts in the yoga field has been recognized, and it has become a national program. So in all the 150 wellness centers, the yoga therapy has to be included, and therefore we need large number of people to get trained. So in this context, the Ministry of Skill Training, association with the Ministry of Ayush, have been able to develop this program to train large number of people as yoga therapy assistants, particularly for the diabetic care. And as we go forward, we are going to bring out other dimensions also in these things. So we really are happy, Ashit ji, for making this possible, and the skill ministry should develop this skill in various fronts. Maybe after this diabetic, we have the hypertension that is being taken up, and then cancer care and other things. And very necessary for the whole country, because unless we have such well-trained people, we will not be able to prevent these NCDs and also promote positive health. So with this, let me pass on the mic to Lorenzo for some of the questions that he has. You can answer one or two.
So there's a number of questions and we can't get through all of them, but one that was particularly interesting and challenging is the issue of the doshas and dosha constitution. We know, of course, from Ayurvedic medicine that we are not going to treat the person who externally has the same disease as somebody else. From a Western perspective, we're not going to treat them in the same way. We're going to look at the individual constitution and imbalances that exist in addition to the particular burden of disease that they may have. This is very similar to traditional Chinese medicine and other indigenous systems, where there'll be this combination of Eastern and Western medicine. The challenge that we have is, from a research perspective, this hasn't been studied, that this particular constitution treated with these particular remedies has a different outcome from an individual with the same Western-based diagnosis but treated in a different way. This, of course, is the essence of individualized medicine and personalized medicine that we're realizing now more than ever in the field of oncology is critical, because although two cancers may look the same, the factors driving them may be very different, and so we have to do a deep dive and understand them at a personal level. Somebody else asked a question, and I'll dovetail this in, about epigenetics. This is all about epigenetics, which is how the genes behave in relationship to the environment. In some sense, this individualization that we could look at from the Ayurvedic system has to do with epigenetics, and that would be something fascinating to look at, is from an Ayurvedic perspective, what is the epigenetic characteristics of a person with a particular dosha imbalance, and do we see more consistencies when we look at individuals from the doshic perspective, and then what happens when we treat them moving forward. This needs to be investigated, but in the meantime, of course, we know from hundreds and thousands of years of practice that this individualized approach leads to better outcomes than the one-size-fits-all approach, which was driven primarily by our pharmaceutical industry.
Dr. Shirley. Can read out the question and answer.
Okay. There's one very simple question. If leptin is an appetite suppressor and obese people have less leptin, then why is it that obese people have a greater appetite? This is an interesting question. In obese persons or people who are overweight, to begin with, the leptin levels rise from 4 nanomoles per deciliter to 50 or even 100 nanomoles per deciliter. Why? Because they're trying to signal the brain, stop eating. But what happens? The person disregards the signal, and after some time, the receptors get blunted. There is what is called leptin resistance. And after this time, the leptin is no longer received by the brain, the signals are disregarded. So however the leptin is high or low, people continue eating because they're not listening to their body signals. And that's where the awareness comes in. That's it. One more question? Okay, I'll answer a very quick question here. Please explain how academic self-esteem is evaluated. We checked it in 2 ways. One is the Battle Self-Esteem Inventory. Very specific, it looks at different aspects of self-esteem. And also, as Lorenzo mentioned, by talking to the students, qualitative analysis.
So there was a question about studies showing that the HPV vaccine, and then they went on and said, or any vaccine is safe and effective. We have, really decades of research showing that vaccines are safe and effective. And the flip side of that is what's happening in the United States is many individuals are choosing not to vaccinate against the measles. And now we are having these outbreaks of measles epidemics in the United States, when in fact measles was essentially non-existent in the country. We can look at the example of polio as well. Polio essentially being eradicated from the face of the planet, but now that individuals aren't being vaccinated, we're starting to see an increase in incidence of polio again. When it comes to human papillomavirus, there's a vaccine against, I think it's around 8 or 10 of the major strains that cause this cancer. This is not something to be taken lightly. HPV causes almost 100%, 99 point something of cervical cancers, again transmitted through risky sexual behavior, which is not something that we can control as easily as giving somebody a vaccine. And the data on decreasing incidence of cervical cancer is now tremendous after 15 to almost 20 years of research. And in populations where people are exposed to the vaccine in an appropriate manner, we see decreasing incidence of cervical cancer. So for a country like India, where we have millions of women being diagnosed with cervical cancer, and then unfortunately not getting appropriately screened, so they are diagnosed with a curable disease. This vaccine would be tremendous and save literally millions and millions of lives every year.
The next question is, my study is on sales professionals, as this is the largest community in the world. Well, I think this is a question, what should we study in sales professionals? One is, one could measure their performance, and this is in relation to yoga. Do the sales become better? But that's very ordinary. I would say, is their quality of life all right? People who are on sales are always on the move. Are they able to eat healthy? Do they get enough sleep? Are they happy with their job? Are they always stressed and trying to increase it? These are some of the points. I will answer this next question and move on to that also. What should the duration be of asanas, pranayamas, meditation, theory for physiological changes in different conditions? First of all, one has to study very clearly what are the needs of that population. For example, the border security force. They were hyper-aroused, their sleep was disturbed. So we would emphasize those practices which both by observation as well as evidence improve their sleep. Their anxiety was very high. So any practice which increases a sense of calmness, reduces anxiety, add it. So in other words, we don't have a fixed answer. What is the duration of asanas, pranayama, meditation or theory? This varies from one population to another after very careful study of the needs of that population and deciding which particular asanas to use, which particular loosening exercises, asanas, pranayamas, kriyas as well, and meditation, as well as, of course, the philosophical principles. So no one figure for all.
So I'll paraphrase this next question, but it's addressing the issue that I raised, which is that certainly in oncology, but also a number of different diseases, there's clear evidence that the practice of yoga, meditation, improves patients' quality of life and is being recommended now by the governing bodies of oncology as something that should be provided to patients for fatigue control, improved quality of life, decrease nausea, mood disorders, etc. Why isn't this covered by insurance companies? The insurance system in the United States is extremely complicated, and it is individualized by state. So unfortunately, the evidence is necessary but insufficient to create the change. What this is ultimately going to take is a multi-pronged approach. One, the patients demanding it, and the public has a very strong voice. It's going to take the hospitals demanding it and pressure from physicians to the insurance companies. And ultimately, it ends up being political. And once you end up getting the politicians involved, then lots of changes can potentially happen. I don't see this actually any different than in India. India is perhaps even more fractured in their healthcare system than we are in the United States when it comes to integrative medicine. In Tata Memorial Hospital, that is collaborators with MD Anderson in Mumbai, and then they're all over the country, they are very skeptical about Ayurvedic medicine. They don't have yoga therapists on staff working with their cancer patients, naturopaths. It's something that in fact they shun because they've been focused on really Western medicine. So I actually look to Dr. Nagendra and the leadership of Ayush to be able to have India be an example of a country that embraces, in particular, bringing yoga into the healthcare system and collecting data on showing some of the benefits of this at really a societal level, and to, in ideally a short period of time, show some true transformations and then something that can be exported to the rest of the world.
As we come to the end of this session, I would like to make a few dimensions which are emerging today in the field of yoga. As you heard the presentation from Dr. Shirley, essentially it is the stress reduction factor or the relaxation factor of yoga that brings all the benefits. At the body level, it is relaxation. At the breathing level, it is slowing down of breath. At the mind level, it is calming down of the mind. These are the three dimensions which are to be understood clearly in our field of yoga. But there is a thinking that when you slow down the mind, when you calm down the mind, when you silence the mind, then are you not become mentally retarded? Are you not becoming slow learners? That is one of the objections that people had. Therefore, many people in the education system said, no, you should not meditate, you should not keep quiet and silence your mind. Instead of that, you be active and running around and be dimension. The entire education system in our country was completely changed by this mindset of the people from Britain. Not only in India, but in other countries also. Our entire education system doesn't talk about calming up the mind, silencing up the mind, tranquilizing up the mind. Instead, we want sharper mind, quicker mind, brilliant mind, innovative mind, creative mind, faster, 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 never slowing down. For the first time in the history, our Maharishi Mahesh Yogi brought out this new secret that were there in our ancient scriptures of yoga, that when you calm down the mind, when you silence the mind, you are not going to reduce your capacities, but on the other hand, you are going to increase your capacities. There is going to be development of all your faculties, your memory, your IQ, your creativity, your efficiency, all are going to go up. That's what he has been able to show by large number of scientific research papers, 800 odd. And therefore, transcendental meditation as a way to calm down the mind, to transcend the mind, became very, very popular around the globe. Therefore, this aspect of calming down the mind, which is the key feature of meditation, bringing the mind to a single thought, effortlessly, and bringing out the dimension of expansiveness with wakefulness, is going to bring about all the necessary changes which had to be emphasized. Number one. The second dimension in cancer, yoga tells that as from Vijnanamaya Kosha you reduce, there is a wrong knowledge that comes. We always think that for all our problems somebody else is responsible. For my asthma, pollution is responsible. For my hypertension, my husband is responsible. My wife is responsible. My children are responsible. Wrong. We are responsible for what we suffer from or what we have. This is the key essence. Therefore, this wrong knowledge sets in from the Vijnanamaya Kosha to Manomaya Kosha, brings about large number of emotions, anger, greed, jealousy, hatred, infatuation, arrogance. And as a result, we start doing things which are not right. And that in Ayurveda, our Gangadhan will tell you that it is called as the Prajnaparadha. And this Prajnaparadha brings about the intense changes in the stress levels and autonomic imbalance and endocrine imbalance, and sets in the body, becomes the vyadhi or the disease. So what is the solution? Reduction of stress, imbalances is one. But deeper than that is to remove that wrong knowledge, the wrong notion that we have. The wrong knowledge not only at the mind level, but it comes down to the physical body. The immune system has a great quality that it should decipher who is a friend, who is an enemy. It knows that cancer cells which are born in our body are wrong ones, are the enemies. Therefore, the immune system takes care of these cancer cells nicely in all of us. But in some place where this ajnana sets in at a deeper level, then it comes down to the immune system and also picks up this wrong knowledge. And this is called viparya. Patanjali talks about the viparya as a wrong knowledge. What is the wrong knowledge? A person gets jaundice and he thinks the whole world has become yellow. That is the wrong knowledge, called the viparya. And that viparya comes down, and the immune system thinks that these cancer cells are my good friends. I don't have to destroy. Therefore, it allows the cancer cells to grow continuously and goes up and out. And then it percolates and becomes the cancer tumors. Then what do? We use chemotherapy to kill those cancer cells, or radiation, or cut out the tumors. Will it solve the problem? Adi is not solved. The wrong knowledge is not corrected. So in yoga, we have to correct that wrong knowledge. Therefore, rightly Shirley pointed out in the end, we have to bring in this theoretical dimension into practice. And unless we have the proper theory, which yoga gives, you will not be able to solve the problem. Knowledge is very, very important. And it is through this right knowledge, you will be able to overcome all the stresses and the fears. And once you start doing that, it happens. Therefore, the key essence of the treatment of cancer or diabetes or modern NCDs is the proper knowledge. And that knowledge has to be emphasized, and rightly our Maheshwaranandji and Amrit Suryanandji as the pioneers in this field have been emphasizing on the dimensions of theory. Theory is very, very important. You must understand and you have to bring it to practice. Just theory will not do. You have to bring it to practice. We say tons of theory is equivalent to an ounce of practice. Practice is important. At the same time, practice without proper understanding may not give you the desired results. Therefore, in the whole courses that our Amrit Suryananda teaches to all these people, he gives a whole knowledge base of the entire thing. Similarly, Maheshwaranji's team brings about this knowledge base. So this has to be brought forth, as rightly emphasized by Shirley in her final concluding remarks, that theory and practice should go together. So in all our courses, whether it is skill training or whether it is yoga instructor course or yoga therapy instructor course or bachelor's degree or master's degree or doctoral program, this theoretical dimension has to be emphasized, and we have to unravel the mysteries that are there in our ancient yoga texts. And similarly, Ayurveda also has large amount of literature and understanding about various diseases, and this has to be brought forth. Similarly, the key components of naturopathy, the theoretical dimensions have to be brought forth, and therefore this deliberations will bring about these theoretical dimensions, what you call as the mechanisms at the body level, but deeper level, the understanding at the theoretical level also has to be brought forth. And once we start bringing out these dimensions, then we have got a more comprehensive, integrated approach of the whole dimension. And if allopathy has dealt the understanding of the mechanism at the body level, we are going down to the gene expression and molecular changes that's occurring, but we have not gone beyond that. The theory about the prana, the mind, the emotion, the intellect, particularly intellectual level, ajnana has to be removed. Unless we do this thing, we will not have a solution. So the integrated modality of treatment, integrated modality of prevention, integrated modality of promotion of positive health should bring in the total knowledge base along with the practices. And that has to be brought forth by scientific research of the immaculate things. And normally in drug research we have double-blind, gold standard, studies, RCT trials. But this doesn't apply for yoga. Therefore, Shirley has promoted this randomized controlled trials to be the gold standards for the yoga. And also, she has been able to bring out another dimension of research, immediate effects. You take the data before and the later with the controlled trial. How the immediate effect can bring about the changes. This also her contribution in our entire thing. This all has to be added on. But the new dimension that we have to bring is to give a new direction to the research methodology of the gold standard, double-blind, RCT trials, is to bring in the dimension of the matching by Vata Pitta Kapha. The personality traits have to be matched. Otherwise, we match in genders, age, and disease. That will not work. And based on this matching that we are doing the world over, the gold standard, the double-blind and RCT trials fails. They develop a drug and they start using it for 1 year, maybe 2 years, then the drug goes out of the control. Why? Number one, they don't have long-term trials. Number two, they have not taken into consideration the proper matching in the matching of the randomized controls. So, Dr. Gangadhar is going to bring out this point, saying that, yes, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, Tamas, Rajas, Sattva are very, very important dimensions for matching of the two groups. And this is the new dimension of yoga and Ayurveda that can contribute to give a new dimension to the gold standard RCT double-blind studies. Then only we'll be able to do that better. And in India, we are very fortunate. We have large number of Ayush hospitals and also the other hospitals where the research is now being promoted through the integrative system. And therefore, we'll be able to bring this large amount of data to bring forth the changes that are needed. So, we are heading ourselves into this new era of bringing the total dimension of yoga, Ayurveda, naturopathy into the forefront and giving directions even to the research methodology which has become the gold standard the world over. And thereby we have to see that we all tailor make ourselves to this total understanding of the matching by the personality traits. Individual medicine has started coming up nicely, and we have to treat every patient according to his personality traits. The individual treatment is very important, and that's how we have to march ahead to see that we go to greater heights. With this, once again, we offer our gratitude and place record the wonderful work that Lorenzo has been doing in the MD Anderson Cancer, bringing the dimensions of yoga, behavioral therapy, Chinese medicine and others, and he will continue doing that with greater rigor in combination with a lot of research that we are initiating. Similarly, I don't have to tell about Shirley, her wonderful work. She has been the pioneer and the leader in the field of yoga dimension, and her contributions have been ever great. So with this, I hand it over to our MC for the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Guruji. I request Guruji to hand over the mementos to our esteemed speakers. It was a wonderful blast of knowledge today morning in this keynote session. A big round of applause. Wow. Dr. Lorenzo Cohen, Professor, Department of General Oncology and Behavioral Science and Director, Integrative Medicine Program, University of Texas, MD Anderson Cancer Center. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for being here with us. Guruji, I also request you to honor Dr. Shirley Telles, Director, Patanjali Research Foundation, Haridwar. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for the knowledge shared with us. I request Dr. Naveen KV, Founder Faiths, to honor Guruji, Dr. HR Nagendra, President of Enigma, Dr. Naveen KV, Indian Naturopathy and Yoga Graduates Medical Association. The greatness of Guruji. Thank you, Guruji. It was a wonderful session. Thank you very much for chairing this session.